The Sunday family dinner at Patricia's house was supposed to be a celebration of my husband's promotion. Instead, it had turned into another session of Let's Criticize Emma. I sat quietly at the mahogany dining table, cutting my roast beef while Patricia held court from the head of the table. "Michael's doing so well at the firm," Patricia announced proudly to the assembled relatives. "Partnership track, just like his father was." Murmurs of approval circled the table. Uncle Robert raised his wine glass. "To the successful members of our family." I noticed he didn't look in my direction when he said it. "Speaking of success," Patricia continued, her voice taking on that particular tone I'd learned to dread, "I had lunch with Margaret Henderson yesterday. Her daughter-in-law just made partner at that prestigious medical practice downtown." Aunt Linda nodded approvingly. "How wonderful. A doctor in the family must be such a source of pride." "It really is," Patricia sighed dramatically. "Unlike some people, she brings real value to her marriage. A professional career, financial contribution, social standing." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Michael shifted uncomfortably beside me, but he didn't speak up. "He never did." "Patricia," his sister Jennifer chimed in, "you're so lucky to have such accomplished children. Both your sons married so well." "Well," Patricia said with a pointed look at me, "one of them did." The relatives exchanged knowing glances. I continued eating my dinner, having learned long ago that defending myself only made these sessions worse. "She brings absolutely nothing to this family," Patricia declared suddenly, her voice cutting through the polite conversation like a knife. "Nothing at all." The relatives murmured agreement, nodding their heads solemnly. Uncle Robert's wife Sarah made a sympathetic clicking sound. "Such a shame when someone doesn't pull their weight. Unlike my friend's daughter-in-law who's a doctor," Patricia continued. "She's saving lives, making six figures, contributing to society. Meanwhile," she gestured vaguely in my direction. "Now, Mom," Michael finally spoke up weakly, "Emma has her interests." "Interests," Patricia repeated mockingly. "That's what we're calling it now? Shopping and yoga classes are interests." Jennifer laughed, a sharp sound that made me wince. "Come on, Michael. We all know she married you for the security. Some women just want to be taken care of." "There's nothing wrong with being honest about it," Uncle Robert added. "But let's not pretend it's a partnership of equals." I set down my fork carefully and stood up. "Excuse me, I need some air." I stepped out onto Patricia's perfectly manicured back patio and pulled out my phone. The evening air was cool against my skin as I scrolled through my contacts and found the number I needed. "Hillcrest Country Club, this is Amanda speaking." "Hi Amanda, this is Emma Sterling from Sterling Holdings. I need to make an immediate change to one of our corporate memberships." "Of course, Mrs. Sterling. Which membership would you like to modify?" "Patricia Hartwell's membership. Cancel it immediately, effective tonight." There was a pause. "Mrs. Sterling, that's one of our Platinum Lifetime memberships. Are you sure you want to cancel? The reinstatement fees are quite substantial." "I'm completely sure. Please send the cancellation notice to her phone right away." "Of course. I'll process this immediately. The cancellation notice will be sent within the next few minutes." I hung up and took a deep breath of the cool evening air. Through the dining room windows, I could see Patricia gesturing animatedly, probably launching into another story about someone else's accomplished daughter-in-law. When I returned to the table, Patricia was in full swing. And then there's Carol's daughter-in-law. She started her own business, made $1 million last year. Can you imagine? $1 million. How impressive, Aunt Linda cooed. Self-made success is so admirable. It really is, Patricia agreed. She brings real value to the family. Not like some people who just exist. I slipped back into my chair just as Patricia's phone buzzed on the table beside her plate. She glanced at it dismissively, then did a double take when she saw the sender. "Hillcrest Country Club," she murmured, opening the message. Her face went white as she read. "What is it, dear?" Uncle Robert asked, noticing her expression. "There must be some mistake," Patricia said, her voice shaking slightly. "They are saying my membership has been cancelled." Jennifer leaned over to read the message. "Cancelled? But you've been a member for 20 years. Platinum Lifetime membership," Patricia said numbly. This has to be an error. I'll call them first thing Monday morning. Michael frowned. Mom, what reason did they give? Patricia scrolled through the message again. It says the corporate sponsor requested immediate cancellation. But that's impossible. The Hartwell family has been members since the club opened. Corporate sponsor? Aunt Linda asked. I thought you paid for the membership yourself. We do. I mean, we did. Patricia looked confused. Robert, you helped us set up the membership years ago. Who exactly is the sponsor? Uncle Robert scratched his head. I remember arranging it through some holding company for tax purposes. Better rates for corporate memberships. But I can't recall the name. I continued eating my dessert while Patricia frantically scrolled through her phone. I'm calling the club right now, she announced. Mrs. Hartwell, came Amanda's voice through the speakerphone. I can confirm that Sterling Holdings requested the immediate cancellation of your membership. They cited, let me see, conduct incompatible with corporate values as the reason. Sterling Holdings. Patricia repeated. I've never heard of them. There must be some mistake. No mistake. The decision came directly from Mrs. Emma Sterling herself. The entire table went silent. Every pair of eyes turned to me. Emma. Michael said slowly. Emma Sterling. I set down my spoon and smiled pleasantly. Sterling is my maiden name. I kept it for business purposes. Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Business purposes. Sterling Holdings owns about 60% of the memberships at Hillcrest, I explained casually. We bought the controlling interest 3 years ago when the club was facing financial difficulties. It was a good investment. The property values in that area have increased substantially. Jennifer stared at me in shock. You own the country club? Not exactly. Sterling Holdings is the majority stakeholder. We also own the golf course next door, the marina, and most of the commercial properties in that district. I paused to take a sip of wine. It's been quite profitable, actually. Uncle Robert's face had gone pale. The holding company that arranged our membership was Sterling Holdings, yes. I've been subsidizing your family's membership fees for years as a courtesy to Michael. I looked directly at Patricia. But courtesy has its limits. Patricia found her voice at last. You can't just cancel my membership. I have bridge tournaments, charity committees, my entire social calendar revolves around that club. I can, and I did, I replied gently. The membership agreement clearly states that the corporate sponsor can revoke access for conduct that reflects poorly on the organization. What conduct? Patricia demanded. I've never done anything inappropriate at the club. The conduct clause covers behavior anyway that might impact the corporate sponsor's reputation, I explained. Repeatedly insulting a major stakeholder's family member certainly qualifies. Aunt Linda looked mortified. Emma, we had no idea you were involved with the club. Of course you didn't. You never asked what I do with my time. I smiled at her kindly. You just assumed I was shopping and taking yoga classes. Michael was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. Emma, how long have you owned Sterling Holdings? 7 years. I started it right after we got married, using my inheritance from my grandmother. It's grown quite a bit since then. Jennifer's voice was barely a whisper. How much is quite a bit? Our current portfolio is valued at around $42 million, I said matter-of-factly. Not including the real estate holdings, which add another 18 million or so. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia looked like she might faint. Uncle Robert was calculating numbers in his head, his lips moving silently. $60 million. Michael managed to croak. Give or take. The markets fluctuate, you know. I turned to Patricia with a gentle smile. But you're absolutely right about one thing. I do bring nothing to this family. Nothing except financial security, property investments, and apparently, country club memberships. Patricia's phone buzzed again. She looked at it with trembling hands. What now? Jennifer asked. The charity board wants to schedule an emergency meeting, Patricia whispered. Something about reviewing our major donor relationships. I nodded sympathetically. Sterling Holdings does donate quite substantially to the Children's Hospital charity. About $200,000 annually. I imagine they want to discuss whether that partnership should continue. $200,000. Uncle Robert choked. Patricia's been the volunteer coordinator for that charity for 5 years, I continued. She's done wonderful work organizing events. Of course, the actual funding comes from Sterling Holdings, but I'm sure the other volunteers appreciate her contributions. Patricia was now staring at her phone in horror as message after message arrived. The yacht club, the museum board, the symphony committee, all wanting to discuss their relationships with Sterling Holdings. How many organizations are we talking about? Michael asked weakly. Sterling Holdings supports about 15 different charities and social organizations in the city, I said. We believe in giving back to the community. Though I suppose we'll need to review which partnerships are still mutually beneficial. Jennifer looked around the table desperately. Surely we can work this out. Family disagreements shouldn't affect business relationships. You're absolutely right, I agreed. Family should come first. That's why I'm hoping tonight might be a turning point in how this family treats its members. Patricia finally found her voice. Emma, I had no idea. If I'd known. Known what? That I might be useful? That I might actually contribute something? I stood up and gathered my purse. The thing is, Patricia, my value to this family was never dependent on your knowledge or approval. Michael stood too, looking dazed. Emma, wait. Can we talk about this? Of course. But next Sunday dinner, I think we should try a different conversation topic. Maybe you could ask me about my work instead of assuming I don't have any. As we drove home, Michael was unusually quiet. Finally, he spoke. Why didn't you ever tell me about Sterling Holdings? I considered the question carefully. When did you ever ask? In 7 years of marriage, when did you ever inquire about how I spent my days or what I was passionate about? He was quiet for a long moment. You're right. I just assumed. You assumed I was the person your mother described. Someone who brought nothing to the table. I glanced at him as we stopped at a red light. But Michael, I never needed your mother's approval to be valuable. I just needed your curiosity. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda at the club. Mrs. Sterling, we've had several calls about reinstatement procedures. Should I schedule appointments? I showed Michael the message. What do you think? Should I give your mother another chance? He smiled for the first time that evening. Maybe we should invite her to tour Sterling Holdings first. Help her understand what you actually do all day. I like that idea, I said, typing back to Amanda. But the bridge tournaments might have to wait a few weeks. The next morning, Patricia called personally to apologize and ask if we could schedule lunch, just the two of us. She wanted to learn about my business, she said. And maybe discuss how the family could better support each other. I agreed, of course. After all, everyone deserves a second chance to discover what someone brings to the table.